Welcome and thank you for joining us today here for part 2 of Scott Morris's interview on From the Heart. There was a lady you were talking about with Pontoc.
Right, Dot Corson.
Okay.
Well, she's somebody else who's another artist, and she's been kind of a conduit to other artists for me. And you have the sheet, and she has this beautiful quote. I talked to her, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago for a new story. And she has this beautiful quote. Can I just have the sheet and read it right quick? Because people really responded to this when it ran in the paper. And her quote was, here we go. You live your life organically. It's not incident after incident. You live your life like a tree. If there is a fence post, you absorb it. If there's another tree blocking the light, you bend to get into the light. You do it because you have to. That's the way life is. And a lot of people responded to that quote. And she'd had a really difficult upbringing, but she found her niche, and now she's an artist, and she would go and travel to take classes with people around the country with her prestigious teachers. And she kind of realized, well, wait a minute now, I could bring the teachers here and host the classes. And, you know, again, these people, these artists, I mean, they're unassuming people often. I mean, you kind of think they'll be pretentious, and they're not really. And she brought a fellow named Mark Hansen to teach, and he taught several classes. But what she found was the artists that she thought would want to go get lessons, who lived around there, would come. But what it turns out was that they mostly stayed away, but artists from other areas came to Pontotoc. And so they would stay in hotels and come to these classes. Well, Mark Hansen, who I had the privilege of talking to a couple of months ago as well, he used to live in Colorado. And he had been coming down to teach these classes in Pontotoc, and something about Pontotoc just appealed to him. Wow. And he said that Colorado, everything is a vista, and everybody's there painting it. But in Pontotoc, you got to look, and I mean, there's beauty around all through here in Mississippi, but you got to pick it and find it and bring it out. You know, edit it maybe or capture it. Whereas, you know, a giant vista of a mountain scene, you know, everyone's painting that. And so in that respect, you know, Dot has brought him, doing her work, of course, but then also brought him to where there's more art, more stuff happening, more things going on in Pontotoc and North Mississippi.
Wow.
So that was really, really a cool thing for her.
It is. You were talking about artists. I always think about, if you think of unassuming artists, the one that pops into my mind is Bob Ross, you know, on PBS, you know, Happy Little Tree. You know, he always seemed like such a down-to-earth, kind of shy guy.
Now, I was forced to paint one time when I was interviewing an artist. Robbie Boyd had me paint a bull one time, and I have it up at the house. But I'd never really painted before that. But when I was a kid, I would watch Bob Ross and I'd put the channel on. And I just found it so relaxing. I didn't really care about painting. I just like, well, let's just settle in and enjoy.
Yeah, he really was.
Yeah.
That is so cool. You also mentioned Tom Hendricks.
Do you know of Tom?
I
Tom's
don't.
Wall? So I was camping with my son at Tishomingo State Park. And it was hot and sweaty, and we were at a program where a ranger was telling us about how the people back in the day had used the trace to come up, and so it was interesting. And then when people started talking about Tom's Wall, and the first thing you learn about Tom's Wall is he didn't want it to be called Tom's Wall. He's up in Alabama, north of the Tennessee River. If you're going on Nash's Trace, it is just before you get to mile marker 338. And he's passed away, I believe this year. But we went up there, and he's built this wall in honor of his great-great-grandmother, who was an Indian who was swept up in the Trail of Tears and taken to Oklahoma.
Oh, wow.
And according to Mr. Hendricks, she took the whole trip there and back, because she came back, because she would need to get back to the Tennessee River and her home. Took about 5 years. And so his grandmother, as he was growing up, would tell him stories. Well, he spent about 25 years making this wall. Now, there are amazing things all over the world. I mean, this wall doesn't compare to the pyramids in Egypt at all, right? But when you look at what one man did with his time, and in fact, the story I wrote about it was wrong because I couldn't believe how good it actually was. I mentioned some area being, I wrote down 6 feet tall, and I said it couldn't be 6 feet tall. And so I put down 4 in the story, but it was 6 feet, just stretching for hundreds of feet one way and hundreds of feet around another way. These rock wall that he pulled out. He pulled some of the rocks out of the river, out of the Tennessee River. Some he got out of the ground, and he met a Weechee Indian woman who said we mark our ancestors with our stones. And he would tell stories about being out and having sleep come down and all kinds of, his breath freezing as soon as he breathed, and putting these rocks in place and doing it. And I think he had a ceremony for one of the wheelbarrows that wore out because it became such a part of the process.
Right.
And so Tom Hendricks, but he said, he didn't want you thinking about him. It wasn't Tom's wall. It was Ishite, which in Weechee language he said meant a quiet place, or Telene, which was the name of his great-great-grandmother. She was also named Mary later on. And if you get a chance to go, it's not far off the trace. Again, you cross the Tennessee River, 338, and you take a right. And as I understand it, a relative of his is still giving tours. And when
Sorry.
No, it's fine. And so when Mr. Hendricks was alive, I took my son there on a different trip, and then I took a friend of mine out there again. And the wall itself is a story, and all the work he did about it. But other people were so moved by it, they would bring their own stones to add. So we had this area where we'd have these stones. He had a meteorite. He had a petrified clam from the Sea of Galilee.
Oh, wow.
And there was this lady from the Depression. She was like in her 90s when she toured it. And she came back and she brought a heart-shaped rock. And so when her husband proposed, he didn't have enough money for a ring, but he went and hunted, and he said, I can't give you a ring. And I think the story was 3 days for him to find this heart-shaped rock. And he said, but I can give you my heart. Well, she was so moved by the place that she put she gave the heart so it became a part of the monument.
Wow.
And, and what was he doing? To affect so many people. I guess again, like William Hurt a little bit. He had this. If my dad started like building a stone wall on his property, I would think, well, Dad may have a screw loose.
Yeah.
So it's a passion thing, a thing that goes beyond just being a regular human being, and you find that like a lot of people who are fun to talk to, so they may have a screw or two loose, because if you're going to do something really cool, really interesting, you got to be willing to not be like everybody else.
Exactly.
And so again, if it were a relative of mine, I don't know what I would have thought about it, but having met the man and spent time with him, I couldn't help but be amazed at all the work he did and the time he put in, the effort he put in, and the effect that decision, that personal decision had on anybody who came and saw it.
Right.
Because you couldn't, I am not overstating, it's not the pyramids, but it's still, it goes on and on and on. And as you walk through it, you think, oh my goodness, he went, no, there's more. No, wait, there's more. And then even when you get through the whole thing, it's hard to take in that one man that did all that work had done all that work.
Is it in a cave or a building, or
No,
is it in the woods?
It's around his house.
Around his house.
I think Threates Crossing, Alabama, not far from Florence.
Okay.
And there's a movie called Muscle Shoals, a documentary about the music in Muscle Shoals.
Right.
Well, they used Tom to open it. So they show some of his wall, and he talks about the Mississippi River, Tennessee River,
Right.
and Muscle Shoals, and how there's a woman inside the river who sings and tells some of the stories. He put out a book called When the Legends Fade, and there's a video about him. That was available when I was there. So a friend of mine got the video, I got the book, and but it was pleasant to get to spend time with somebody who just went out of the ordinary.
Right. Have you ever talked to any of the Native American people around here?
Well, recently, not a whole lot, but some. Recently, they're actual Chickasaw princesses. They're from a pageant, and so it'd be something like a pageant we would have here. But two of their talents were telling traditional Chickasaw stories, and they would wear jangle dresses, traditional clothing that they would wear, and that they would make or somebody would make for them.
Right.
And so these princesses have become ambassadors for the Chickasaw Nation, and they're sort of looked upon as people who a lot is expected from in the future. And so they travel to New York. I believe there's an event they're going to, or maybe Washington, D.C. They're going to go to a Daughters of the American Revolution event. They're going to go to a big conference of Native people in New Mexico. But Northeast Mississippi is their homeland.
Right.
And so they came in Tupelo not long ago, and they went to different sites to kind of get a taste of where, Piamingo and Tishomingo and these people we've heard about. You hear the names,
right?
And come and be a part of it. And it was really enjoyable to see them kind of. It's interesting to think like my homeland. I mean, I grew up in Alabama, but I mean, as far as like ancestry, I mean, it's England, Germany, and they're all over kind of thing.
Right.
But for the Chickasaws, this is the homeland, and they have sites that are really important to them that the governor and others come on at regular intervals to visit and be a part of. And so somebody told me one time that really all of Tupelo is an Indian burial ground in some way. And that's not that there are bodies everywhere, but people lived throughout. And so, and before modern technology came in and started changing the landscape, and Tupelo, I mean, I don't know if you can find a Tupelo gum in Tupelo now because you got to have water for it. But it used to flood all the time, and that was the way it was in the before all the modern agriculture came in. And so it's interesting to think about where we are and what it used to be. The past is always a fun story.
It really is. I mean, I love going out to the Indian Mountains over at Ingomar,
right.
Because that is such an interesting site. And I mean, it's a famous site. We have archaeologists that come in here and dig on that.
From the Smithsonian years ago.
Yes.
And then they had the atlatl contest.
I know that was so much fun to watch.
I've never seen that. I've written previews about it, but I've never been, and I've had other things going on. But I'd like to see that sometime.
Oh, good. Yeah. Hope you get to come.
Yeah.
Another one of our native sons that we have here is Mr. Hudson Hickman.
Yeah. Pat Raspberry, the late great Pat Raspberry, was film commissioner in Tupelo before she died, and she brought Hudson down to speak at the Tupelo Film Festival. And I met him at a lunch, but I was lazy and didn't read all the materials. I knew he was a Hollywood guy, a producer, and I think I knew MacGyver and such, but I didn't know, because I had just discovered on repeats on FX Dead Like Me.
Yeah.
And I loved that show. I don't know why. For a period of time, it's like I was just hooked when he came. And so luckily I got to meet him again and tell him how much I enjoyed the show. And I think I'm Facebook friends with his, and one of his Facebook friends, I did a little stalking, is the actress Ellen Muth, M-U-T-H, excuse me. Ellen played George Lass in that, and so and she runs a coffee shop in Connecticut now.
Wow.
But but what's been fun about Hudson lately is that he and Sam Haskell, Amory boy, who's now an Oxford boy, who's also a Hollywood man, these two guys have worked together for these Coat of Many Colors movies and the Circle of Love, the Christmas movie, which is going to be re-aired, I believe, in December, and based upon Dolly Parton's life, and obviously Coat of Many Colors was a song, one of her big songs early on about her life.
Right.
And thanks to Sam Haskell, I have a great story. I told you the story about the middle finger. Now I'm going to tell you the story about I was interviewing Dolly Parton back at the Stars Over Mississippi benefit concert in Amory, I think around 2000. And Dolly Parton touched my inner thigh. That's one of my favorite stories to tell. You know how she just kind of reached over and just kind of, because I had made a joke about something. And so that's one of my claims to fame. And her character in 9 to 5 was Dora Lee, and my mother was Dora Lee, and so they kind of, we had a little connection there.
Yeah.
And I haven't talked to her since then, but I kind of been in her orbit thanks to Hudson and Sam. Dolly Parton's like I don't want to get all morbid, but at some point in time, we will not have Willie Nelson anymore, and we will not have Dolly Parton anymore.
Right.
And I mean, imagine what those days are going to be like. I mean, that's going to be crushing for all kinds of people. But the fact that we have them is amazing, and the fact that to be around their orbit is kind of amazing. And Sam, Dolly, and Hudson were up for Emmys. They did not win this last year for the movie they made about their Christmas movie.
Right.
But it was a great privilege just to be on the periphery of them talking about getting their tuxes, losing weight, these guys wanting to, and how like, I mean, look, Sam and Hudson are professionals, and they know how to do what they do. They've been a part of Hollywood for like 30 years or more, and they're not easily impressed, but they were giddy during nomination time.
Right.
Absolutely giddy. And that's fun, because you like to find people like that, caught up in their emotions, caught up in something that's bigger than them.
Right.
And, and I mean, Sam is an amazing individual in that I remember I hadn't seen him in years, and it was almost like I could see the mental processing going on as he added the ages to my kids' ages so he would know how old they are now.
Wow.
He's got that kind of memory and that kind of mind. It's very impressive. And what's more so impressive is the fact that he and Hudson both retain, in every interaction I've had with them, have always been just the most gentlemanly of people. And so accomplished men, giddy as schoolgirls about an Emmy nomination. Yeah, that's
fun.
Yeah, that's fun. And so, I would, when you interview some people in town, I just write it out. But if you only have a certain amount of time with somebody, you'll record it. And so, you talk to them. I had them on a group call, and so I was taping it. And so as you transcribe the notes later, you're hearing it all over again, and it's just fun.
It is.
But yeah, Hudson, he was one of the men behind Dead Like Me, and then you'll catch a MacGyver episode every now and then and see his name at the end, and it's just kind of it's fun to have those connections to the pop culture, and I guess we're back to the screen and TVs because it means so much,
right? And
their lives have been so much about it.
That's talking about being surprised that William Faulkner, did you know he did several screenplays?
I did.
One of my favorite movies with Humphrey Bogart and Laura Bacall is To Have and Have Not.
To Have and Have Not, yeah.
He wrote that.
Now, as far as I'm not encyclopedic about it, but I remember there's a story that he was out in Hollywood and he was having trouble with writing something, and he went to the boss, to the producer, the director, and said, "Hey, can I take this home and work on it?" And they said, "Sure." And they thought he was going back to his Hollywood bungalow, but he came back to Oxford to write it. Yeah.
Can I go home?
Also, they had an exhibit. Apparently, he loved mystery novels, and so dime mysteries, just mystery novels. And so he's known for literature, but he loved this other type of writing. They had the J.D. Williams Library at Ole Miss had a exhibit one time of some of the Mississippi mystery writers and some of the ones that he had liked so much.
Oh wow!
And so you think like I don't know I have no idea what it would have been like to have spent time with him and talked to him. You don't know. Would I have been able to keep up? You kind of doubt that.
Right.
But then again, he could have just been cool as all get out.
There's a gentleman that does a reenactment of his, and he reenacts him, and he the title of it is, "Oh, Mr. Faulkner, do you write?"
Right.
You know, and that come from an interview when somebody asked, when they were talking to another writer,
Right.
and they mentioned that he wrote, and they was like, "Oh, do you write?" And he's like, "Yeah, a few things." You know, it's just like, you never know the people that you're going to run into, what they have in their background.
That's true. That's true.
And that's one reason why we do this show, is because we want to know people's stories.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty interesting.
I think what I've learned is that everybody's got a story, but you can't always pry them out. You know, there's a couple of people who said no over the years, and you know they weren't stars or anything like that. But a lot of times I think that maybe like Christian people who didn't want to put themselves on display. You know, and I still regret that I didn't get to tell their stories just because you know. Just because everyone's got a story, and it's fun to uncover them and then present them in a way that where they can look at that story and say, that is me. I remember I wrote a story about a lady named Peggy Oakes, who was a longtime piano teacher in Tupelo, and she was leaving to go, I believe, Kentucky to live near her family. Doing the same thing my dad had done, leaving Alabama to come to Mississippi to live near us. And my boss at the time, Lloyd Gray, said, you know, I meant to tell you that that story I read, it sounded just like Peg Oakes. It's like you captured her, and that's like all I wanted to do. And that my only goal was to make sure that when you read it, and her family read it, or she read it, she saw herself there, and that was like I had won that day.
Wow,
yeah.
That's great. Scott, thank you so much for coming and talking with us today.
Oh, are we done? Because I could babble on for another 3 or 4 days.
Well, is there anything else that you want to tell us?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us here today on From the Heart, TV 99 North Mississippi. And remember, we tell stories of life because life is interesting.
Come back to me.